All right, what's up, everybody? This week's mini level up, I've got 10 Tarkir cards and some interactions with them that I want to talk about. So some of these are going to be like unintuitive rules interactions. Some of these are cool outside the box plays that you might not think of. And some of them are cards that are just easy to make really silly mistakes with. And I want to point out those mistakes so you don't have to be the one making those mistakes. The first three cards we're going to talk about definitely fall into that last camp there. Just these are easy to make silly mistakes with. You don't want to be doing that. Here's one I've called out a few places, but I still see people making mistakes with this one, so I will call it out again. Glacial Dragon Hunt, the red-blue uncommon that has you drawing a card and you can discard a card. If you discard a non-land this way, it deals 3 damage to target creature. A very important word on this card is may. You do not have to discard a card. So if you draw and you don't have any spells in hand, you don't have to discard a land. If you just like your spells, you don't have to discard any spells at that point. So just be aware, it's a may. It's a very important word. Another card that falls under the camp of RTFC, read the frickin' card, is Stadium Headliner, the 1 mana 1/1 rare. You can sacrifice it to deal damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature. The mistake that's easy to make with this is counting the headliner when you're trying to figure out how much damage it's going to do. So your opponent has a 5/5 that you want to kill, and you've got 5 creatures, one of them being the headliner. Well, you sacrifice the headliner, you now only have 4 creatures. So just be careful of that. Headliner does not contribute to its own ability here. And a last one here on the silly mistakes not to make. This is a bit of an arena-only one, because this is not a mistake you're going to make in paper. Spectral Denial, which is the X and a blue counterspell. Counter target spell unless its controller pays X, and this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature with 4 power or greater you control. And the thing with this is that you have to manually set how much mana you would like your opponent to pay still. So let's just imagine you have 2 4-power creatures on the battlefield, and you've got 1 and a blue up, so 2 real mana. If you want to make them pay 3, right, and counter unless they pay 3, you still have to set X as 3. So you manually have to do this. Arena isn't going to just naturally count your 2 4-power creatures. Again, just one that's very easy to mess up. So yeah, those are some sort of straightforward ones. Let's get a little bit deeper into some more complex stuff. So next up, we're going to talk about Teville, the Sultai Mythics. This is the 6/6 flying lifelink creature. Spells you cast have Delve. Whenever you cast a spell, you lose life equal to its mana value. And the thing I want to talk about with this card is its interactions with the hybrid cards, with the 2-bred cards. And there's 2 things to talk about here. So one is talking about what mana value actually is. And mana value, for the most part, if we're not talking about X spells, they're an exception, but mana values are an immutable feature of a card. They never change, whether it's in your hand, in your library, on the stack. And for these 2-bred cards, they're always going to be the most mana you could cast them for. So, for example, Kintree Severance, and I think actually all of the cards in this set, all the hybrid cards follow the same template. They're like 3 of the mana, but you could pay 6 overall if you wanted to cast them for colorless. This is always going to be a 6 mana value spell. So no matter what you cast this for, if you cast Kintree Severance for obs on mana, just 3 mana, Teville is still going to ding you for the full 6. But it's not all downside with these hybrid cards and Teville, because there is some upside here. Because they are colorless, really, if you wanted to cast them for all red mana, this one in particular, you can cast Teville on turn 5, and then if you have 6 cards in your graveyard, you can cast Kintree Severance for absolute free. You don't have to tap any real mana. Usually you think with Delve, okay, at least I have to tap 1 real mana, but not the case for colorless cards. So, I know I've done this once, I think, in the format, where I just slammed Teville, and then on turn 5, I was also able to cast a removal spell at instant speed. Opponent doesn't see that coming, and I think I even got like a 2-for-1 because they used the combat trick to try to get through Teville. So yeah, just 2 little things to look out for there. Next up, another kind of weird interaction rules-wise is Host of the Hereafter. So this is the 2 black-green 2/2 that enters with 2+1/+1 counters. And it says, whenever this creature or another creature dies, if it had counters on it, put its counters on up to 1 target creature you control. So the weird thing with this card is what those words actually mean. It put its counters on 1 target creature you control. Because that's actually just shorthand for look at the number of counters on that creature when it died and put whatever that value is on something else. And usually this is, they're one and the same. It doesn't actually matter. But if you have 2 Hosts of the Hereafter on the battlefield, that does matter, because you might think, okay, well, my 1 creature with a +1/+1 counter dies, I only get to put 1 counter on something else. not the case. You actually get to double up there. Because what happens is the game sees, okay, there's one counter here that I get to put on something else, but there's 2 instances of that, right? So when you have 2 Hosts of the Hereafters, it actually does double, where it might not intuitively seem like it does. It might just seem like, okay, I'm actually just physically moving the counters over. That's not the case. Next up, we've got Baron Step Siege, and the mode we're going to look at here is the Mardu mode that says at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died under your control this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. I'm actually kind of surprised that they made this card the way they did, because I think a lot of people think, oh, it works so well with Mobilize, because you attack and your Mobilized creature's going to die, and then you get to make them sacrifice something. If the Mobilized token is the only thing that died that turn on your side, your opponent doesn't have to sacrifice. The problem here is, I believe this is why it doesn't work, but the problem is that if a creature hasn't died under your control, this just won't trigger in the first place. So you go to the end step, the Mobilized tokens trigger says, okay, I've got to sacrifice, but that's too late for the Siege to see it. So yeah, you actually do need something else to die for this to work. So yeah, super unintuitive. I actually got gotten by this one myself. I'm actually a little bit surprised that they printed this card as is. I don't know if there's a great rules workaround, but maybe just have a different mode on the card, one that doesn't seem to synergize with the mechanic, but doesn't actually. Next up, we've got New Way Forward, the 5-mana Jeskai instant rare that says the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage. When damage is prevented this way, New Way Forward deals that much damage to that source's controller, and you draw that many cards. So very important word here, source of your choice. This is not targeting. When you choose a damage source, you don't actually have to target. It's sort of a strange thing of the rules, but what this means, of course, is that you can target a hexproof creature. So if your opponent's 6-mana Teamer Dragon that has hexproof until it deals damage attacks you, and that's the first time it's attacking, you can still target it, quote unquote target it, but you can choose that card and it'll prevent the damage and you'll draw the cards. They'll be dealt 6 damage. This also means that something like Snakeskin Veil cannot stop New Way Forward, or there's the black-white Omen Dragon that gives something hexproof that can't stop this card too. So yeah, both relevant for the person casting this card, knowing you can proactively target a hexproof creature, and for the person who has the creature that this card is choosing. A Snakeskin Veil cannot stop this card's effect. Next we have Storm Scale Scions. This is the 6-mana 4/4 flying dragon that says other dragons you control get +1/+1, and this has Storm. And just a thing for people who have not been playing for 20 years, might not know the exact text of Storm, and it says it right here. When you cast this spell, copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copies. As you may have noticed, this doesn't say spells you've cast. So this is relevant because there are situations where you might just want to cast it pre-combat to pump one of your dragons, give it +1/+1. But it might be worth considering in some spots going to combat first, seeing your opponent has a spell to cast in combat, then you get a whole new dragon. That's definitely worth it. Worth missing out on a point or two generally. Also, you might end up in situations where your opponent has this card and they've revealed it somehow. Maybe they cast a Dragonologist, the blue rare that looks at the top 6 and takes a dragon. They've shown it to you. You know they have this card. You should know that there's a cost associated with you casting spells on your opponent's turn when they might cast the Scion. Next up, we've got Naga Fleshcrafters. So this is kind of a cool one. This is the clone that you can exile from your grave to make all your creatures copies of the thing that you put a counter on with their renew ability. And what you can do with it, an interesting line, is when you're at 7 mana, you can just cast the Naga, choose to copy nothing. It just goes straight to the graveyard because it'll be a 0/0, and then you just get to renew right there if you have a lethal line. You don't have to cast this and then copy something and then wait for this thing to die. No, you can just do it all in one fell swoop. If you've got a dragon on the battlefield and like 3 creatures, that's often lethal right there. So yeah, just sort of a weird line with this card you might not think of, because usually when you cast your clones, you don't want them to just go to the graveyard. Next up, we've got a 2-card interaction here, Jeskai Revelation and Monastery Messenger. Jeskai Revelation, of course, is the 7-mana Jeskai Mythic that returns target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. It deals 4 to something. You make 2 monk tokens, you draw 2 cards, and you gain 4 life. And the Messenger, when it enters, you put 1 non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard on top of your library. So the obvious thing here is you cast your Revelation, and you cast Monastery Messenger, and you go, okay, I get to do it again. The slightly less obvious thing here is Messenger is already on the battlefield, and you choose the Messenger as the thing that you bounce, right? Because that just sets up a loop of you could just cast Jeskai Revelation basically every other turn from that point on. This is especially helpful to know about because if you're already thinking of the level 1 synergy with this card of like, okay, I really want my Messenger to get it back my Revelation, you might hold off on casting the Messenger and be like, well, I don't want to cast it now. I want to be able to get back my Revelation. This game's pretty grindy. The first revelation isn't actually going to kill the opponent. But no, you can just run it out, peck in for 4-6 points or whatever, and then, you get to buy it back. Basically, you get to have your cake and eat it too. And then the last one here has to do with Riverwalk Technique. This is the 4-mana top or bottom spell. And of course, whenever there's this kind of card, you always want to see, are there cards in the set that have your opponent milling cards or searching out cards? Because if you can time this right, this becomes an actual, basically, kill that thing removal spell. So your opponent cracks an Evolving Wilds. That's when you're going to want to, in response, cast Riverwalk Technique. Or they cast a Monument, same kind of thing. Or they have something that self-mills, right? So Inoc Wayfarer, the 2-mana green creature that mills. So yeah, this format in particular, I think, has a lot of cards that are like that, interact well with Riverwalk Technique. But yeah, this card in general, just whenever this card exists, and it exists in most sets these days, the top or bottom removal spell, always be on the lookout for your opponent searching their library for anything. And that's going to do it. Yeah, those are my 10 cards I want to talk about here. If I missed anything, if there's a card that you want to shout out that you're like, oh, that's an interaction that I came across that was kind of cool, please let me know, because I'm sure I've not covered all the interesting or cool interactions. And yeah, love to hear about them. That's going to do it. Thanks for watching.